In the busy town of Eldoro, a little girl named Zaya lived with her widowed mother. Since her father's death, Zaya dreamed of being the center of her mother's world, the reason for her smile. She tried to make her mother proud, helping with chores, studying hard, and even making little drawings just to see her laugh. But her mother's heart slowly changed when a new man named Malik entered their lives. At first, Zaya thought maybe this man would bring happiness back into their home. She even tried to welcome him, calling him Uncle Malik, and offering him the sweets she saved. But soon she realized things were different. Her mother's laughter was now for Malik, not for her. The warm hugs she once received before bed became fewer, and instead of hearing, "I love you, my Zaya," she only heard scolding or silence. Little by little, the bond between mother and daughter weakened. Malik's presence grew stronger, while Zaya's importance faded. She was treated more like a burden than a child. Sometimes when she asked her mother for help with homework, her mother would wave her away, too busy cooking Malik's favorite dish. At night, Zaya would curl up in her small bed, whispering, "Why am I not enough? Why doesn't Mama love me the way she used to?" Her young heart carried questions too heavy for her age. The little girl who once dreamed of being her mother's treasure was now learning the bitter taste of being unwanted. Zaya's world kept changing, and not for the better. Once, her home was full of warmth. She remembered how her mother would braid her hair, sing lullabies, and share simple meals with laughter. But all of that began to disappear the moment Malik settled into their lives. He became the center of her mother's attention, and Zaya felt like a shadow in her own home. Her mother, who once saved every coin for Zaya's school shoes or a small sweet, now spent all her money buying Malik gifts. A new shirt here, a fancy watch there, while Zaya sat at the table with an empty plate, waiting for food that never came. She would ask softly, "Mama, can I eat too?" But her mother's reply was cold. "Wait, Zaya. Can't you see I'm busy with Malik?" Malik, on the other hand, knew exactly what he was doing. Whenever Zaya's mother was near, he whispered poison into her ears. "She's holding you back," he would say with a sly smile. "You deserve freedom, you deserve me, not the constant burden of raising a child." Those words stuck to her mother's heart like thorns, and little by little, she started believing them. The house that once echoed with laughter and bedtime stories now only echoed with anger. If Zaya accidentally dropped a cup, her mother shouted at her. If she came home late from school, she was accused of being careless. Even her silence was called disrespect. No matter what she did, it was wrong. Zaya tried to win back her mother's love. She cleaned the house, she studied harder. She even drew small cards with the words, "I love you, Mama," written in her shaky handwriting. But instead of a hug, she was met with cold stares or Malik's mocking voice. "See? She's desperate for attention. Don't let her control you." Nights were the hardest. Zaya would lie awake, her stomach empty and her heart aching. She remembered the days when her mother tucked her in, kissed her forehead and promised, "I will always protect you." But now those promises felt like lies. Instead, she listened to her mother's laughter from the other room, the laughter that once belonged to her but was now given freely to Malik. Sometimes Zaya wondered if she had done something wrong, if maybe she wasn't good enough to deserve love. She prayed silently, "God, please make Mama see me again." But every passing day only made her more invisible. The rain poured heavily that night, beating against the thin roof of their small house in Eldoro. The air was tense, the kind of silence that makes your chest feel tight. Malik sat in the living room, his voice low but sharp, whispering into Zaya's mother's ear. "You need to choose," he said. "It's either me or her. You can't have both. She's dragging you down." Zaya stood nearby, her little hands shaking, watching her mother's face harden. Her heart raced. She could feel something terrible was about to happen. She stepped closer, her voice soft and desperate. "Mama, please. I'll be good. I'll try harder. Just don't send me away." But Malik smirked, leaning back with victory already in his eyes. "See how weak she makes you look. She's begging, and you'll keep wasting your life on her." Her mother's eyes filled with confusion and pain. For a moment, Zaya thought she saw love flicker in them, but it disappeared quickly, replaced by anger. She shouted, her voice trembling but loud, I choose him, not you. The words struck Zaya like thunder. Her small legs went weak. She tried to cling to her mother's dress, sobbing uncontrollably. Mama, please don't do this. I don't have anyone else. I only have you. But her mother's hands pushed her away, harder this time. The door was flung open, and the cold rain rushed in. Malik stood behind, his arms crossed, satisfied. Go, her mother yelled, her eyes burning with something Zaya couldn't recognize anymore. Get out. Barefoot and trembling, Zaya stepped into the storm. The rain soaked her thin clothes instantly, chilling her to the bone. Her tears mixed with the raindrops as she stumbled into the dark streets of Nakuru. Every sound, the barking dogs, the thunder, the rushing water, felt like the world was closing in on her. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to keep warm, but nothing could stop the ache in her chest. She looked back once, hoping her mother would come running after her, calling her name, pulling her back into safety. But the door slammed shut, and the lights inside dimmed. Zaya realized she was truly alone. Her tiny feet splashed through muddy puddles as she wandered aimlessly. People passed by, shielding themselves from the rain, but no one stopped for the little girl shivering in the storm. Her stomach ached from hunger, her body from cold, but her heart hurt the most, from the truth that her mother had chosen a stranger over her. That night, Zaya found shelter under a broken shop awning. She curled into a corner, hugging her knees tightly, whispering into the darkness. Why, Mama? Why am I not enough? The storm raged around her, but nothing was louder than the silence of her mother's absence. It was the night Zaya's childhood ended, the night she learned what it truly meant to be abandoned. The little girl who once had a home filled with love was now living like a stranger under her own roof. She was no longer her mother's treasure. She had been replaced, and the pain of that truth cut deeper than hunger ever. The days after Zaya was thrown out felt endless. She had no home to return to, no hand to hold, no voice calling her name with love. The streets of Nakuru became her world. At night, she curled up on cold benches in the market, trying to keep warm under the torn shawl she had found in a trash pile. The stars above seemed too far away, and the world around her was too cruel. Yet even as tears soaked her face, she whispered the same words every night. I will not break. Hunger was her constant companion. Sometimes she begged for food outside small shops, her voice barely audible. Please, just a piece of bread. Many ignored her, some pushed her away, but a few kind strangers gave her leftovers. She learned to swallow her pride along with stale bread, because survival left no space for shame. During the day, she wandered the roadside stalls. Some stall owners took pity on her, letting her sweep the floors or carry small loads in exchange for a few coins or a plate of rice. The work was hard, and her tiny hands often blistered, but Zaya never complained. She told herself, this is not my ending. This is my beginning. Everywhere she went, she carried pain like a secret fire inside her chest. But instead of destroying her, it fueled her. She remembered her mother's words, I choose him, not you, and instead of letting those words crush her, she used them to grow stronger. She promised herself that one day she would rise so high that the very people who abandoned her would bow their heads in shame. Nights were the loneliest. She watched other children walk home holding their mother's hands, laughing and safe, and her heart ached with jealousy. She longed for that warmth again, but she also knew she had to create her own light. She whispered to herself in the darkness, one day, Zaya, one day, you will not cry like this again. Sometimes she drew little pictures in the dirt with her finger, houses, books, even a big building with her name on it. She didn't know how, but she believed deep inside that her story would not end on the streets. People who passed her saw only a poor, abandoned girl, but inside her was a spirit refusing to die. She learned to be strong in silence, to fight battles no one saw. She carried wounds on her heart that no medicine could heal, but she also carried hope, fragile yet unbroken. Zaya's life was now a struggle every single day, but with every hardship she survived, she built a new layer of strength. The little girl who had been thrown away was slowly turning into someone the world could never ignore. She was broken on the outside, but inside a warrior was being born. One ordinary afternoon, Zaya was sweeping the dusty floor of a small library in Nakuru. She had taken the job just to earn a little money for food, but to her, the library felt like a secret treasure. The shelves were filled with books that smelled of old paper and wisdom. Even though she was only supposed to clean, her eyes always wandered to the pages. Whenever no one was watching, she would pause her work, pick up a book and read a few lines. The words gave her comfort, almost like a friend whispering hope into her heart. It was during one of these moments that an old man noticed her. He was Professor Jambo, a retired teacher who spent most of his days reading in the library. He watched the skinny girl with tired eyes and torn clothes bend over a book with such hunger, not for food but for knowledge. Curiosity pulled him closer. "Do you understand what you're reading?" he asked gently. Zaya looked up, nervous, afraid she would be scolded for touching the books. But she nodded shyly and explained the story in her own words. To his surprise, her explanation was sharp and thoughtful. That day, Mr. Jambo saw not just a poor child, but a spark, a mind too bright to be wasted on sweeping floors. From then on, he began to talk to her every day. He asked her questions, listened to her answers, and gave her simple lessons after she finished cleaning. The more they talked, the more he realized Zaya's hunger for learning was deeper than anything he had ever seen. "You are not meant to live on the streets, child," he told her one evening. "Your mind is a gift, and gifts like this must not be buried." For the first time since being abandoned, Zaya felt truly seen. She felt like someone believed in her again. With Mr. Jambo's help, she was enrolled back into school. It wasn't easy. She had to catch up on years of missed lessons, but she refused to give up. Every day she woke up early, worked small jobs to survive, and spent her nights studying under the dim light of a borrowed lamp. Her classmates laughed at her torn uniform and worn-out shoes, but Zaya didn't care. She held her head high because she knew she wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to build her future. Her notebooks filled with neat handwriting, her grades climbed higher each term, and slowly the teachers began to notice her brilliance. Knowledge became her weapon. Every page she read gave her power. Every lesson she learned built her confidence. The little girl who once slept on benches now dreamed of standing tall, not just for herself but for every child who had ever felt unwanted. What started as a simple job sweeping a library became the turning point of her life. That small ray of hope, one kind professor, one chance to learn, was enough to light up the darkness she had carried for so long. And once the light entered, Zaya promised herself it would never fade again. Zaya's life slowly began to change, but it was not an easy road. Every success she achieved was built on sacrifice. While other children slept peacefully, she stayed awake under a flickering lamp, her eyes burning from hours of study. While others played in the fields, she worked small jobs just to buy notebooks and pencils. Hunger still visited her often, but she let her hunger for knowledge be stronger. Her hard work did not go unnoticed. Teachers admired her discipline, and soon, scholarships opened doors that once seemed impossible. She moved from one level of education to the next, always pushing herself, always carrying the memory of the rainy night she was thrown out. That memory no longer weakened her. It fueled her. She told herself again and again, "I will not let pain define me. I will define myself." When Zaya graduated with top honors, she stood on stage in a simple dress, her heart pounding with pride. The applause felt like a healing balm to all the wounds of her childhood. The girl who once begged for food on the streets was now celebrated for her brilliance. Yet she was not done. Her dreams were bigger than a certificate. In Nairobi, she found opportunities waiting for those who dared to take them. With courage and vision, Zaya started her own company. At first, it was small, a single room with a desk, a chair, and endless determination. But her leadership was unlike others. She did not lead with fear or pride. She led with empathy, remembering what it felt like to be voiceless and invisible. Her ideas were bold, her strategies sharp, and soon her company began to grow. Investors trusted her, workers admired her, and within a few years, she became one of the youngest CEOs in the country. Her name was spoken with respect not just in boardrooms, but also in the hearts of ordinary people who saw her as living proof that pain could be turned into power. Every success story written about her reminded the world of her journey. Reporters called her the girl who rose from the streets to the stars. Schools invited her to speak, and children listened with wide eyes as she told them, "You are not defined by where you start. You are defined by how far you choose to go." Zaya never forgot her struggles. She built scholarships for other children like her, opened small learning centers, and made sure no child would be denied education because of poverty. She knew what it felt like to be abandoned, so she became a voice for those who had none. The little girl who was once pushed into the rain now stood tall in glass towers, her name shining in golden letters. Zaya Muthoni was no longer just a survivor. She was a symbol of strength, a reminder that broken beginnings can lead to powerful endings. The girl who had been unwanted was now unstoppable. While Zaya's life was rising, her mother's world was slowly falling apart. The love she had once chosen over her own daughter began to rot from within. Malik, the man she sacrificed everything for, showed his true colors. At first, he had been charming, filling her with sweet words and promises. But once he had full control over her life, the mask slipped. He took her money piece by piece. First, it was small requests, new clothes, a little business idea, a loan he swore he would repay. Then it grew larger. He sold her belongings, drained her savings, and convinced her to sign papers she didn't even understand. By the time she realized what was happening, it was too late. Malik had taken everything, and just when she thought he would at least stay by her side, he left. Another woman, younger and wealthier, caught his eye, and he abandoned her without a second thought. No apology, no explanation, just a cold goodbye. Her mother, once proud and confident, was left broken. The friends who once praised her disappeared. The neighbors who once envied her whispered behind her back. She was aging, tired, and penniless, with no one to lean on. The man she chose had left her, and the daughter she had rejected was nowhere in her life. Nights became the hardest for her. She sat alone in a small rented room, staring at the cracked walls, remembering the warm home she once had. Sometimes she replayed the night she pushed Zaya into the storm. She told herself, "I had no choice. I had to choose." But deep inside, guilt ate away at her soul. It was in those quiet, painful moments that she began to hear whispers. At first, she thought it was just gossip, but soon the whispers grew louder, clearer, impossible to ignore. "Have you heard about Zaya Muthoni?" people said in the markets. "The young CEO everyone admires. The girl who rose from nothing." Each time she heard her daughter's name, her chest tightened. It was like thunder crashing inside her heart. The same child she had abandoned was now a symbol of strength across the country. People praised Zaya's brilliance, her kindness, her leadership. Children in schools were told, "Be like Zaya." And yet, the woman who had given birth to her was sitting in shame, too afraid to admit the truth of what she had done. Sometimes, she would imagine walking into Zaya's tall office building, falling at her feet, and begging for forgiveness. Other times pride stopped her. She wondered if her daughter even remembered her, or if she had erased her completely. But deep down she knew one thing: the world had turned upside down. The daughter she had once thrown into the rain was now shining like the sun, while she herself was left in darkness. And that truth, more than Malik's betrayal, was what broke her spirit piece by piece. The morning sun was hot, and the streets of Nairobi buzzed with people rushing to work. In front of a tall glass building, one of the biggest in the city, a long line of job seekers stretched across the pavement. Among them stood a tired woman, her shoulders bent under the weight of her years. She wore faded clothes, her shoes were almost broken, and in her hand she clutched an old file filled with papers. That woman was Zaya's mother. Her life had fallen so low that she now stood with strangers, waiting for the small chance of employment. Sweat rolled down her face as she whispered to herself, "If only they give me a chance, I can survive." She tried to hold her head high, but deep inside she carried shame. She had once been a proud woman, choosing Malik over her daughter, but now she was nothing more than one of the desperate faces in a long queue. The building itself was breathtaking, its walls of glass shining like diamonds in the sunlight. People passing by stopped to admire it, pointing at the golden letters displayed proudly near the entrance. Zaya Muthoni Yo. Her mother froze when her eyes landed on that nameplate. For a moment, she thought her eyes were deceiving her. But the truth was right in front of her. The daughter she had thrown out into the rain, the child she had abandoned without mercy, was now the powerful woman who owned this empire. Her knees weakened, and her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She looked around, hoping no one noticed the shock on her face. The line moved forward slowly, and with each step, she felt her past catching up to her. Memories flooded back. The night Zaya cried, begging not to be thrown out, the cruel words, "I choose him, not you." She had buried those memories for years, but standing there outside her daughter's towering success, they returned with full force. Some of the people in the queue whispered with admiration, "I hear Madame Zaya is kind but strict. She gives jobs only to those who truly deserve it." Another said, "She is so young yet so powerful. Imagine working under someone like her." Each word cut through the mother like a blade. To the world, Zaya was a hero. To her, Zaya was the child she had betrayed. When it was finally her turn to step inside, her hands trembled as she tightened her grip on the file. She walked through the shiny glass doors, her reflection staring back at her, a worn-out woman who had lost everything. She never imagined she would one day stand in front of her daughter not as a mother, but as a beggar, seeking mercy in the form of a job. The golden nameplate glimmered again before her eyes. Zaya Muthoni Zio. And in that moment, she knew fate had brought her here for a reason. The little girl she once cast away was now the only person who could decide her future. The office was quiet, its polished floors reflecting the morning light. Assistants moved quickly from desk to desk, carrying files and answering phones. Everyone knew this was not an ordinary company. It was the empire built by the youngest CEO in the country, Zaya Muthoni. When the door opened and an older woman stepped inside, no one paid attention at first. She looked out of place in her faded dress and worn shoes, clutching a file so tightly her knuckles turned white. But the moment her eyes lifted and locked onto the woman behind the grand desk, the entire room seemed to freeze. Zaya sat there in elegance and power, dressed in a simple but striking suit, her name engraved on the golden plate before her. Her face, calm yet strong, was the same face her mother had once turned away from on a stormy night. For a few seconds, silence filled the air, so heavy that even the ticking of the clock seemed louder. Her mother's lips trembled as her knees grew weak. She dropped the file she was holding, and papers scattered across the floor. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, almost choking on the words, "Forgive me. I was blind." The staff, standing nearby, looked on in shock. They exchanged glances, realizing what was happening. This was not just another applicant begging for a job. This was the woman who had abandoned the CEO when she was only a child. The tension was unbearable. No one dared to speak. Zaya rose slowly from her chair. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her face remained composed. She remembered every detail of that night. The rain, the cold, her mother's cruel words. "I choose him, not you." Those memories came rushing back, pressing against her heart. Her mother fell to her knees, sobbing openly. "I was wrong. I chose the wrong person. I lost everything. Please, my daughter, forgive me." Her voice cracked with regret, the kind that comes too late. Zaya's staff watched closely, waiting to see what she would do. Some thought she would shout. Others expected her to turn her mother away just as she had once been turned away. But Zaya only stood there, silent, her heart torn between anger and compassion. Finally, she stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She reached down and picked up the fallen file, placing it gently on the desk. Then she looked straight into her mother's tear-filled eyes. Her voice was calm but firm, carrying both pain and strength. "You threw me away when I needed you most. You chose a stranger over your own blood. I will never forget that night. But I am not the broken child you left in the rain. I am Zaya Muthoni." The room stayed silent, all eyes on her. Her mother covered her face, weeping, as Zaya turned back toward her desk. The little girl who was once unwanted now stood as a woman the whole world respected, and in that moment, every person in the office knew they were witnessing a story no one would ever forget. Zaya stood quietly, her hands resting on the edge of her desk, as her mother wept in front of her. The room was heavy with silence. Every staff member waited, holding their breath, wondering what their CEO would do. Would she turn her mother away, or would she forgive the woman who had once pushed her into the storm? Zaya's eyes filled with tears, but her face remained strong. Her voice, calm yet firm, broke the silence. "I will help you," she said slowly, "but I can never forget what you did to me." The words cut through the air like glass. Her mother looked up, shocked, her lips trembling, but Zaya did not falter. She walked around her desk and placed a chair in front of her. "You will work here," she continued, "but not as my mother. You will be like every other employee. You will earn your place, you will work with your hands, and you will see what it means to stand on your own." The woman who had once thrown her daughter away nodded silently, too broken to argue. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Thank you." Word of what happened spread quickly across Nairobi. People spoke with awe of the young CEO who showed mercy without erasing the truth. The girl who had once been unwanted was now proof that strength could rise out of pain, that forgiveness did not mean forgetting, and that even the deepest wounds could be turned into power. For Zaya, it was not about revenge. It was about standing tall, proving that no storm, no betrayal, and no abandonment could stop her from becoming everything she was meant to be. The story of her life became an inspiration for all.